This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm Drew Dixon. I am the chief content nerd of Love Thy Nerd, and I'm joined with Chris Gwaltney. By Chris Gwaltney. Chris Gwaltney.
Quiz.
Hey, Quiz.
Man, if I had a nickel for every time that happens when people try to say my first and last name, I'd have at least like $1.
Oh, really?
But
people struggle
it happens
with your
a lot.
name?
Well, because it's Chris Gwaltney, but if you just try to run it together, it always comes out Quiz.
I think that's the only time I've ever done that. But
sounds really cute, but it's also weird.
Yeah.
But I'm Chris Gwaltney. I'm the chief executive nerd for Love Thy Nerd and co-host with Drew.
Yeah. You having a good week?
Too soon to tell.
Yeah, it's just
But
Monday.
yeah, I think it's fine.
When we're recording
it's
this.
Christmas time.
Yeah.
I don't know when this will come out, but we're in the thick of the Christmas times.
Yeah. You gonna be traveling for Christmas or staking it out there?
No, thank the Lord.
Yeah.
We're just staying here, which is nice. Like, it's bittersweet because we don't get to see family and stuff, but it's kind of cool just for me and Ashley to chill out and not have to do anything and just like eat cinnamon rolls and open presents.
Is that
or
your
something.
tradition, cinnamon rolls at Christmas?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we have, I think so. Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is like a good tradition. I like cinnamon rolls. So we have a special guest, and that's Brett Vance. Hey, Brett, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so people might know you from Cyanide and Happiness. You made a game with Cyanide and Happiness called Joking Hazard. What else how would you frame yourself for our listeners?
Easiest way to describe it is marketing. But so technically that's my job title is marketing director. But I do a lot more than just that. I do a lot of content creation, a lot of videography, photography, and a whole lot of other miscellaneous stuffs. If there's something that needs to be done, I'm one of the top people that they come to for. So
awesome.
You're the closer.
Yeah, I'm always be closing.
That's going to be your new title. Always be closing.
I feel like there's some people that, for whatever reason, maybe haven't come across Cyanide and Happiness or listening to this. I feel like most of our listeners will be familiar with what that is, but could you frame that for our listeners? What is Cyanide and Happiness?
Cyanide and Happiness is actually, in and of itself, Cyanide and Happiness is an intellectual property owned by our parent company, Explosm. Explosm is an entertainment company. We produce daily webcomics, animated shorts. We're the largest animated channel on YouTube. We have 3 seasons of a show on VRV, and we have 2 other shows on 2 other streaming services. We're producing currently in development 2 video games, and we have 1 board game.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you guys were...
So not much.
Not much.
What video games are y'all working on? Can you talk about those?
So we have one that was kickstarted late last year called Freak Apocalypse, and it is a point-and-click adventure game. And so we're getting ready to release Chapter 1 very soon. We're just cleaning up some stuff. The second video game is a battle royale. And it's a top-down isometric battle royale, so it's a little different than a traditional first-person shooter. Really fun. That is currently in early access, which you can grab from Steam. It's on PC only right now, and that is called Rapture Rejects.
Rapture Rejects, that's right. So that's got some fun theme to it.
Yeah. So
is Kirk Cameron in it?
No. Luckily not. I mean,
unplayable.
Oh yeah, luckily not.
So yeah, but tell us how that's like. How does the Rapture play into this game?
Yeah, so Rapture Rejects, the premise of the game is God has another regretful moment about humanity and decides to go ahead and just end it all. And everybody who didn't get raptured is obviously very unhappy about this. And so God has decided that whomever is the last person standing gets a golden ticket to heaven. So you are fighting
Great.
for your place to heaven amongst all the other rapture rejects.
Nice.
Hunger Games.
Basically.
And it's like 2D top down, is that what you said? So like kind of like a old school Grand Theft Auto feel, or how does it?
It is. So it's a 2D isometric. So it's like a top
2D.
down.
Okay.
So it's kind of, you move the four directions, but it's so you're able to move obviously in. It feels very like you're moving in 3D space. You're actually able to rotate the camera around your character so you can get different vantage points as well.
Okay.
But it would be the isometric top down.
How's that been received so far?
So far, it's been really well received. Most of the criticism is items we are already planning. It's early access, so our items we're already planning on addressing or issues with low player base, so long wait times, small rooms, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I'm excited to check it out myself. Matt sent me a code that I think you were going to share. That's for me from you. So thank you.
Yes.
I'm definitely gonna be playing that now that I have some time. With some time off for Christmas, gonna be playing that soon. So
let me know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. So did I get that wrong? Were you involved in actually making Joking Hazard, or were you mostly on the marketing end?
Primarily on the marketing end.
Okay.
I joined after it was funded on Kickstarter.
Okay, cool.
Right around the time they were fulfilling, but I have helped, write cards and work on mechanics and stuff like that. Down the kind of, as the game has progressed, and so still very, very active in it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like one of the biggest, like the initial Joking Hazard was one of the biggest Kickstarter success stories, right? Like
it was
card game space.
It was definitely up there. We were second only to Exploding Kittens for quite a while, and then I believe Exploding Kittens has been supplanted as number one or surpassed already. So I think we're somewhere around third or fourth or something like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was really well received. People still really love the game. So we play it weekly and have a lot of fun with it.
At your office, you guys play it regularly?
Yep. Obviously, to keep on top of it. Also testing out new cards. Seeing if we can find something. We're constantly surprised by new card combos that we hadn't necessarily seen that are actually really good. So that happens at least once a week. So
that's cool. So
that's just always like astounding to me when we talk to developers and like that they play. Playtesting games is like there's guys that do it hundreds and hundreds of times and don't get bored. Mm-hmm. Like that's amazing to me because I get bored after playing a game like just a couple times. So what's the secret? What am I missing?
I think for us, we are either testing new cards. I think environment is very helpful. It's part of the job. So rather than I could be doing something else mentality, it's hey, I get paid to play a card game right now. So that helps. Yeah. And then we're also probably playing differently than most people. We're trying to intentionally break the game. We're testing out new cards. So we're usually throwing kind of a stick in the wheels to see what we can do to change it up, make it better, maybe offer up alternate rules. That type of thing.
And this is a game, like, I feel like we should probably frame it a little bit for our listeners. Because Cyanide and Happiness is not just like any old webcomic, right? Like it's
It is adult humored.
yeah, like
To say the least.
pretty heavy and pretty dark, right?
Yeah. So, the guys, the original 3 creators, still do a bulk majority of all the writing, and they're known for adult/dark humor, kind of no topic being out of bounds, and they're really well known for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Well, sometimes it's cool. I guess it could also be dangerous. No. Do you ever because there's obviously, I mean, you just go to your website and you see some pretty obviously you're trying to push the envelope a little bit. Have you ever played with people because y'all are playing all the time? Do you ever play it and you go whoa, that was too far, or is kind of the mentality just that's the point, just to find that place that's too far or whatever?
Personally, there's been things that I'm like, oh man, that's really kind of pushing the envelope. In general, the kind of the stock answer the guys give, because they get asked a lot, is there anything you won't make a joke about? And their general response is, if it's funny and we think it's funny, we will share it.
Yeah.
And so if they don't share it, it's not because they don't particularly find it. It's because they don't particularly find it funny, as opposed to finding it too offensive or anything like that. I will say that we do generally shy away from making fun of specific people or specific people groups. As a general rule of thumb, now, we might make fun of Nazis and we're okay with that. But while they might poke fun at religion or something like that, it's usually just the general idea or something in good nature, rather than a direct, you're stupid if you believe these things.
Right. Yeah. Or a direct insult against Muhammad or Jesus or something.
Right.
Yeah. That's cool. I appreciate that. So, Chris, you want to ask this question from our community before we jump in here?
Oh, sure. So we try to do it for every podcast. We give the opportunity for one of our monthly supporters to either come on to the podcast with us and ask our guest a question, or we'll ask the question on their behalf. So today's question actually comes from Jamila. And here's a little fun fact about Jamila is that she's the one that actually came up with the name for our organization.
Oh, that's cool.
We just kind of put it out there in our community. When we were first starting this thing, literally the name of it was Working Title because we didn't know what to call it. And so we put it out there to our community. And I think back then it was a few hundred people. And, there were all kinds of name suggestions. Honestly, most of them were bad. But Jamila, there she was. Love thy nerd. And we were like, that's the one.
That's awesome.
Anyway, that has nothing to do with her question. So here's what she wrote for you, Brett.
Okay.
First of all, she said, I flippin' love this game. I think my question would be, what brought on the idea of a game based off Cyanide and Happiness? What was the process on the concept? Was it I know exactly what I want this game to be, or, okay, let's say we make a game. Are we crazy? Will it succeed? Where do we go from here? So I know there was probably more than one question there, but I think just the general, where did this come from? How did this come to be?
Sure. So Joking Hazard was the brainchild of Rob Denblicker, who's one of the creators of Cyanide and Happiness. And it started, actually, we have a random comic generator. If you go to explosm.net/RCG, like random comic generator, you can do this, and it's got hundreds of panels, and you just click random and it creates these random comics. And at one point, Rob just kind of it clicked for him, this could be playable. And so, like everybody else, we decided to rip off Cards Against Humanity, and and
which ripped off Apples versus Apples.
Exactly. Everybody,
right.
Everybody. When that's my stock
Nothing
response.
new under the sun.
Yeah.
when people say we ripped off Cards Against Humanity, I say, man, it really sucks when we worked really hard to make an apples to apples ripoff and we get pinned for Cards Against Humanity.
That's right. Yep.
Screw those guys.
I'm sure they're lovely people, but screw them.
Exactly. So yeah, it came out of that, and Rob built.
Well, hey, I just made a random comic, and here it is. Why are you looking at me like that? I have balls too. You are the best brother in the world. Random comic generator. There you go.
So go to Explosm. I need to do this now too. Explosm.net/RCG.
RCG.
Okay. Sorry, you were actually answering a question here.
No worries. No worries.
No, this is important.
Yeah, it feels important.
It's very important. Yeah, so Rob was like, man, this would make a good game. So he kind of made some prototype versions, basically just printed out the panels from the random comic generator, and went from there, testing what worked. There's a lot of cards that were on the random comic generator that didn't make the cut because while they're funny in the random comic generator, they're not really good cards to play with.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Rob took it to a ton of parties and get-togethers and had people play and kind of fine-tuned it over time. And then once we thought it was ready, threw it up on Kickstarter, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Did you get a good one, Drew?
I did get some good ones. I've clicked through probably 7 or 8 now.
You sound hesitant to share.
Yeah. I can't share that one.
You can whisper it to me. Just whisper it to me later.
This one's okay. This one's more safe for work. Feeling better today, son? A dad says to his son, I guess. Then the son says, how about we inject heroin into our eyeballs? And then one of them gets beamed up into a spaceship or something, I assume.
Okay. No,
So
that makes total sense.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's
not the funniest one I saw,
we're going to
but yeah. I don't want to share the funniest one I saw.
Yeah. We'll get the explicit rating on iTunes for sure.
Yeah. So, what has been the what are some cards that I wonder if you could share some, because you said you've been involved a little bit in making some new cards for the game and things like that. Are there some that stand out to you that I'm really proud of this moment that I created that was hilarious, or some combination that you contributed to that?
I'm trying to remember. I've written a handful of cards. I actually don't remember exactly what they were. We kind of, our process is where we submit card ideas and then it eventually gets tested. And so a lot of times I don't remember which ones they were.
Yeah.
I know a couple of mine made it into our latest expansion, Deck Enhancement 3. And so I've got that. In terms of something I'm particularly proud of, this year our April Fool's Day joke was Joking Hazard Family Edition, and that was my idea. And so the whole commercial is for a version of Joking Hazard that's safe for the whole family, and it's 8 cards.
Wow.
And so we worked,
well done.
We worked on that and put together a lot of solid videos. It was real fun.
That's nice.
See, that's why you're the marketing closer right there.
That's
you
right.
just earned your title.
Yes.
That's cool.
For another year at least.
Have you ever had people come to you at conventions or just message you online and be like, "You're sick," or like, "How did you guys come up with this?" Or that get mad at you for the type of edgy content that's in your game?
We get actually surprisingly not a lot of hate anymore. So Cyanide and Happiness got started in 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
So it's been around quite a while. And that was when people were still scared about what to put on the internet. And so there wasn't a lot of adult humor. There's adult content, but not a lot of adult humor. And so that idea of making inappropriate jokes wasn't quite there. So that got a lot of hate. We still do. If you go to Amazon and look at the Joking Hazard 1-star reviews, most of them are people who bought the game and then complained that it was too inappropriate to play with their family.
Right.
Despite the numerous warnings that we have everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've gotten hate mail. We get we've never had anyone at a convention be angry with us, or I haven't personally. So I'm sure it's happened.
I would hope that most people would would be wise enough to read warnings and know what they're getting into. But you can never really trust people to do the right thing completely. So,
exactly.
I was just curious. Well, where are you from, Brett? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but our listeners didn't hear that.
Yeah, I'm originally from Houston, but been in Dallas since 2007. That is, the company is based out of DFW. So been here for 11 years.
Nice. And how did you get connected with Cyanide and Happiness, or not Cyanide and Happiness, but Explosm?
Well, we every year Explosm hosts a banana bar crawl. So everybody dresses up like bananas, and we go
As
around.
one does.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And we host it, open up to all our fans, and we just dress up like bananas and go to the bar crawl.
Yeah.
So I went to my first one, the first bar crawl, which I believe was 2008. So I happened to see on the website that was happening in Dallas, and I had just moved to Dallas not too long ago, and not too long before, and was super
What were you
stoked.
doing at this point?
I was in college.
You were in college. Okay.
I moved to Dallas for college in 2007.
Yeah.
And then I went to.
And you were at. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at a Christian college.
That is correct. I went to Dallas Christian College. It's my alma mater.
Were many people from Dallas Christian College sneaking off to bar crawls?
More than you might think.
Was it so? I went to a Christian college for a year. That's about as long as I lasted. And it was completely forbidden to drink alcohol at all. Even if you were 21.
Yes, we were.
If you were caught drinking, that was a punishable offense.
Yep.
Was that the case for you?
Absolutely the case for us.
Yeah, I would think so, because Texas seems to be a little more conservative, certainly.
Yeah.
I hope we didn't put your degree in jeopardy by talking about this on the podcast.
No. I eventually worked at the college for 4 years. So.
Oh wow!
So
you were deep undercover.
Yeah. Eventually, all the administrators found out. It was one of those situations. It was easier because we had supporters from across the spectrum. So it was easier to just put a blanket ban on drinking. It wasn't so much that they thought it was sinful.
Right.
So it wasn't a sinful thing. Staff was allowed to drink, just not allowed to talk about it.
It was a CYA kind of thing.
Yeah. So, it was
Don't
just
ask, don't tell, don't put it on Facebook so we don't get in trouble.
Yep. That's right.
Gotcha. So anyway, you're sneaking off to this...
Anyway, we interrupted the story, yeah.
You're sneaking off to this
to a pub crawl.
Bar crawl as a naughty Christian college student.
That's right.
Naughty banana Christian.
And a
That's
banana.
right. So that was when I kind of first made my connection with him. I had been reading Cyanide and Happiness since 2005, 2006. I was a sophomore in high school. One of my good friends introduced me, and so I'd been reading, so I was already a fan for several years, really excited that there was the bar crawl going on. So I actually went every year. We've had 10 bar crawls. I've gone to all but one. So I was able to just kind of make some connections. So I was Facebook friends with a handful of people. So by the time a marketing position opened up, I saw the people posting about it on Facebook saying, hey, we're hiring someone for marketing. And I was like, I do marketing. So that's kind of how that worked out. And then I just applied and went through an interview process just like any other job.
Yeah. So were you doing marketing for your Christian college at that point?
Yes. So I got started in the admissions office, and then I moved to the marketing department, and then I did marketing for.
So what was that shift like from marketing?
What a shift! That's either from rags to riches or riches to rags, whichever way you look at it, I guess.
How many crowns did you lose for making this change?
Oh man,
I'm just kidding.
I don't think I lost any. Probably lost more at the college than.
Oh wow! Oh, shots fired, man.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
But what I am curious, like that must have been like, just in terms of like work culture, a pretty distinct shift from going to a place that hosts comics like Cyanide and Happiness from sounds like a pretty conservative Christian college.
Yeah, it was a big shift. So it was really the culture at the college. I was on the younger end, so it was mostly life stage difference in terms of my interaction with my coworkers. Obviously, going from a culture that prayed regularly, that valued, quiet time and spending time with God, going over to a fully secular company was a big shift. Yeah. That would probably be the biggest. And now I am on the older end of people that work for Cyanide and Happiness. So
yeah.
So that going from kind of the child on campus to one of the seemingly wise people was also a big shift.
Yeah.
No one came to me for problem solving when I worked at the college. So
yeah,
right.
But now
they call you grandpa.
Yeah, basically.
Now you're keeping all these Gen Z people on task, or something like that. Maybe. So we kind of touched on this already, but I guess you grew up going to church and stuff, or was that a part of your upbringing?
Yeah. So I was raised until I was 12 in a not well-known church that was very Old Testament based. So until I was 12, I had to keep all the holy days, obey the kosher food laws. We went to church on Saturdays. We weren't allowed to celebrate anything that had any pagan origin. So no Easter, no Christmas, no Halloween.
Yeah.
So I was a part of that church, and so I.
This is because of your parents, or
yes. So
okay.
my mom was raised in it. My dad was not raised particularly religious. His parents were Baptist, not by name only, at least at the time. Yeah. And then when my dad married my mom, he's like, well, I guess we're going to your church. So,
as dads do.
So they, so they raised us in that. And then around that,
and he was like, what? I can't eat bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was sad about that. He was more sad about shrimp. He was sad about losing out on shrimp. Then when we were around 12,
what was the church called?
So it's had a bunch of splits, but it was originally called Worldwide Church of God. It was founded by a guy named Herbert W. Armstrong. And at one point, it really was at the church's height in the 70s or so. It was literally worldwide. I've done missions work in Germany with a pastor who was raised in Germany who grew up in the Worldwide Church of God.
Interesting.
And so there was even when I was young, there was probably at least 2 congregations in every major city in the U.S. and usually at least 1, usually 2. So there's 2 in Houston, 2 in Dallas, 1 in Austin. And, that's not just, Texas. That was all across the U.S. So the church split, became what was called United Church of God. And then that has split again, and it's currently called Church of God, a Worldwide Association, or
the the United Church of God split.
Yes.
I didn't want to miss that.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
And so now
Yep.
it's the Church of God, a worldwide association, or COGWA for short.
Yeah.
So
Do they still
Congo.
like do all the kosher
Yes.
food laws and things?
yes.
Okay.
So there's some other key differentiators. They're actually binitarian. They're not Trinitarian. They do not believe in the divinity of the Holy Spirit, which was interesting. Which was an interesting shift for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time I was 12, my parents started reading the New Testament a little more thoroughly and realizing, hey, we've been set free from this stuff. And so they said, hey, we're going to leave this church. That was a huge shock for me at 12
Yeah.
years old. Essentially, what I felt like, not only was it a big transition, but worldwide / United, it was pretty much official doctrine that we were the only right ones, and that even Christ-believing Christians who did not keep the law were not part of, would not
going to hell
enter
or whatever.
in, would not go to heaven,
Right.
would not inherit the kingdom.
Yeah.
So this was for me not just okay, we're going to have a slight shift in doctrine. This was, this is wrong. I remember arguing with my mom and my aunt, telling them that it's absolutely ridiculous. We would never celebrate Christmas. That I can't believe that they would be okay with that, with these horrible pagan traditions.
So you were like more zealous for this than your parents as a kid. in a
At this
way.
time, obviously, my parents had been my parents. If you would have asked my mom 10 years before we left, she would have said the same thing. There's no way she would have ever ever left.
And your dad was just like, well, I just do whatever she does.
No, he was actually at this point he was pretty ingrained, and now he's an incredible spiritual leader. So
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
so yeah, we left the church. My parents found, we started church shopping for the first time in our lives. My mom grew up in it. And then my dad, had never really gone to church. So the first time in our lives, we found ourselves church shopping. And
I'm kind of curious too, like, sorry, I keep asking questions about
No.
this, but interrupting your story. But so when it kind of clicked for them that there's something off about this, did they immediately like change their diet and stuff?
No, they kind of weighed everything, continued searching, and they waited till we officially left the church before
Yeah.
kind of doing more. And so it was a slow progression into it.
I appreciate that. Because like I think there's a temptation when we sort of realize we're wrong about something, or like our views on something changes. I think the temptation would be to just like, all right, we're celebrating Christmas. We're gonna have an Easter egg hunt tomorrow, and I'm gonna cook up some
make
shrimp
up for all the ones we lost.
like, and just do it all and like throw yourself at it completely. But it seems like your parents were trying to be more wise and sort of like, hey, let's figure this out. And
Well, there were a lot of social implications as well. It was very, there was a lot of
I would imagine that's not the type of church you leave and people are just like, oh yeah, sure, cool, go visit go visit the Methodist church down the street, no biggie.
Right. They weren't exactly spiteful, but there was we certainly became social outcasts amongst people we had been friends with our entire lives.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, because that was your social circle. So oftentimes you're talking about people my mom has known since she was a child growing up into the church. So
Right.
losing, a lot of friends,
Well, good on your parents,
I was just gonna say the same thing, man. Like
'Cause,
that's
like, a lot of people
super
would
brave of them,
just
because
look
that's
at this.
hard.
Yeah. A lot of people would just look at the social stigma and go like, well, we'll just put up with it because I don't want to deal with.
yeah,
But it sounds like they tried to make the decision that was best for you and your family,
yeah,
despite
absolutely.
the cost.
It was, looking back, it was very, very grateful that they proceeded with wisdom, they proceeded with prayer, all that good stuff. So, yeah. So after after that, we found a church, and it still is, this church that we found is still my gold standard for churches. It was an absolute incredible community. Just a very strong Bible believing people who wanted to do nothing more than to serve God and to love people doing it. So they were very active in outreach, in missions, and in ways that I think a lot of other churches miss. We went out once a month and just mowed lawns around the neighborhoods around the church. Just nothing more than saying, hey, we're guys from Northside Christian Church, and we just want to mow your lawn for free. And that was it.
Yeah.
Just a lot of really cool outreach stuff like that. And
Are there any people from Northside that live in Nashville that want to mow some lawns?
Well, I think Brett will still do it. He's still doing it.
Yeah, I'll just show up.
He'll one day. Oh, hey, there's Brett
in his banana suit.
I've got like 4 banana suits at this point, so
yeah,
impressive.
So yeah, they showed me a side of faith that I didn't realize I was missing. It was very eye-opening, and they taught the Bible faithfully, and so they were very open to my questions, and so I came with all these questions, and I was able to sit down.
I just love that. Oh, I'm literally getting chills because I feel like even on this podcast, we hear so many stories about hurt caused by churches and church communities. And like, just to hear about the rare,
story of healing
unicorn that is a good church or a healthy church or a good representation. Like, I just love hearing that. So I'm glad you had that experience.
Yeah. I don't know that it's a unicorn. I think it's like, I mean, I understand feeling that way. I think it's that like good churches like that you just don't hear about them enough. You know what I mean? They're out there. It's just, for whatever reason, like it's the stories of hurt that get amplified sometimes, or don't get addressed.
But like even here, like with most of our guests, like they grew up in a church or grew up in like a religious setting, and it was a hurtful experience or like not an experience they look back on fondly.
Yeah. When we hear a lot of people
it's just
too
really cool.
on this show come in and say like part of why they left the church was because they had a bunch of questions that weren't really welcome. Like when they asked questions, they felt like they were shut down or kind of like treated as if they were a threat to the church by asking questions, Right. And so your story of coming into this church after being in a confusing and difficult and hurtful in some ways situation with your other church where your parents were like, ostracized and things, and like socially, to come in into a situation where like people welcome you to ask questions, that's that's really encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it was it was really, really awesome. In any question I had, they let me sit down, and they welcomed me with open arms and just said, ask away, because they firmly believe that, that God is truth. So if God is truth, then, he can't be taken down by difficult questions. So that was, I was encouraged, in fact, to ask questions, because they felt like the more I questioned, the more I would find answers and the right answers. And obviously they helped guide me and all that, but it was really wonderful. So after that, it took a lot of getting used to, obviously transitioning churches like that. But after that, it made sense to me. It made a lot of sense. And so, I guess, I would have always considered myself a Christian, but I've kind of been a little more focused ever since then versus coming out of the old church.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So, so you got started with this church, and then you went to this Christian college. I guess that probably came out of, to some degree, your Christian upbringing and stuff. What was your plans when you went to this college? Were you wanting to go into ministry, or you just wanted to go to a Christian university?
It's kind of an interesting. I was actually talking about this with some of my college friends last night, and it was kind of an interesting how I ended up there. I had always planned on being a chemical engineer, or at least an engineer of some sort. I loved chemistry. It was a natural fit for me to be a chemical engineer, so I applied.
It's a little different than marketing.
Yeah. So I had applied to A&M. I was offered a full ride scholarship to study chemical engineering.
Wow.
And halfway through the summer between my senior year and my freshman year of college, I just did not think. I started talking to chemical engineers and realized that just did not sound like something I wanted to do. I talked to a guy who has a master's in chemical engineering, and his job was to maintain spreadsheets of pipeline pressures. And I was just like, man, that sounds boring. In my mind, I'm thinking chemical engineer. I'm going to be working at like 3M or something, like a bad scientist. And then to find out that
blowing stuff up.
Yeah. And then to find out it's mostly desk work and, running spreadsheets.
Right.
That just didn't sound good to me. And the only other place I had applied was to Dallas Christian College. And that was at my parents' urging because they're like, you should apply to more than one school. I was like, but I've already been accepted. Yeah. I have no need to. And so they said,
gosh, why are parents always right?
I know. It's infuriating.
Screw them.
So
not your parents. They're probably lovely, I'm sure.
Just parents in general.
In general. Yeah.
Their wisdom. So really it was at their urging. And so because that was the only other place that I had applied, I was like, well, I guess this is where I'm going. And I was interested in learning more about Christianity in general, about my faith, because I was very engaged at my church. I was very academically inclined around the Bible. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to explore the philosophy and the history of Scripture. So I ended up majoring in biblical studies with no real intent on going into ministry. It was certainly a possibility, but there was no real intent. So when I got there, I fell in love with theology. I thought it was fascinating. I majored in biblical studies, minored in biblical languages, so I fell in love with Greek. New Testament Greek is just such a beautiful language, and I realized how much more there was to be able to understand about the Bible than just the surface level. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Bible is that it's a very basic message, but can be studied so deeply and has so many intricacies that are also very important. So I fell in love with it. And then after I graduated, I had worked in churches and just didn't really see that ministry clicked for me. So I was working at Starbucks for a few months, and the position opened up in the admissions office, and I was like, well, I need to do something. So that's how I kind of ended up there.
Yeah, I kind of made some comments about this before, but you went from obviously working in these pretty conservative circles in the church to working for an organization that I think it's pretty edgy. and obviously Joking Hazard is a game that has a reputation for being pretty edgy, like Cards Against Humanity level edginess of and not safe for workness. What do, or well, I guess maybe ask what you think of, like, do people, like Christians around you, find that like concerning, or do they ever get concerned about what you do? Does it bother you on any level? It doesn't bother me, for the record. I'm not like accusing you. I'm just curious because there's all these weird, I think stigmas we have as Christians
I think
sometimes
too,
for stuff like that.
To help frame this, like, we have a lot of Christian listeners, and we get questions very often, sometimes from parents or sometimes just from, Christians that are like, oh man, concerned about content, like, oh, am I allowed to play this game, or am I allowed to watch this thing, or, is Game of Thrones a one-way ticket to hell? Like, so I think hearing from someone like you that's working in an area that some people would be like, oh, well, that's just, utter blasphemy. I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you, like, what your thoughts are on that kind of stuff. And, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I've definitely received a lot of disdain from many Christians.
Sounds like you're being nice.
My mom has struggled a lot as well with me working here, and much of my extended family as well. And so it's really funny. So they find themselves in a conundrum because I was the good Bible college. I was, kid, and I was always the one who, led family Bible studies. I was the one everybody came to for Bible questions, and they saw me as this really devout guy. And now all of a sudden they're concerned about that. But at the same time, they still have this view of me. And so they're not really sure where that fits in.
You're backsliding, bro.
That's definitely the view of a lot of people.
Yeah.
But so it comes from, I guess, really two main points. When I read the Bible, my understanding of Jesus has always been a focus on loving people. We are told, 1 Corinthians 13, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest is love. Like Paul literally says, love is more important than faith.
Right.
We are told that loving God and loving your neighbor, that the entire, law and the prophets, the entire entirety of Scripture hangs on those two commands.
TLDR.
And when Jesus is when Jesus is constantly accused of doing inappropriate things, and his answer is always he's loving them. So he's accused of getting in trouble for hanging out with prostitutes and hanging out with sinners and doing all these things that are considered not good, not what a good Jewish person would do. And he's saying this, no, but this is what a good Christian would do. And so he found himself in a lot of questionable situations, or at least from the outside looking in, questionable. Socially unacceptable.
From a religious perspective. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't see, so studying the Greek, I really wish that they this translated, but there are a handful of times that profanity is used in the New Testament. Paul certainly uses it.
Gasp.
Jesus says some things that what we might not consider profane, but calling the disciples stupid would have been considered quite profane, in the New Testament time. Things that he said were, very questionable, like I said. And then I think there's at least one solid, I don't know if I can say this on your podcast, but at least one solid reference to Paul making a dick joke.
Yes.
where he is,
When
where
he
he's
says he
saying,
wishes
"Hey, if you
the false-
guys are gonna, go, if you think circumcision saves you, why don't go away the whole way and cut it all off?"
Yep.
That's not Paul being spiritual. That is Paul being like making a joke.
I think a lot of people read that as Paul being really angry.
Yeah, and
But I do think you're right. There's like some humor there.
Yeah,
that he's not just being.
He jests. He jests.
yeah. He certainly was. He certainly was angry at the time as well. But I think he's also using a ridiculous, almost satire to prove a point.
Right.
Right.
So all that to say, I what I see in the New Testament is what has traditionally been called Christian morals is called into question by the New Testament. And so in terms of social interactions, I suppose, all that to say, I would feel comfortable standing before Christ telling him how I love people. And I think he would say to me, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." So the second part to where I'm at is I am put in a unique position to love on people that most certainly are not Christian. And in the entire office, there are only 2 other Christians. And one of them is still exploring a lot. So I find myself, we have 30 people in our office here in Dallas. And so I find myself in a situation where I'm with a lot of non-believers and I get to simply love on them. And I get to answer their questions. And I am frequently told, I've been told by a coworker, if I had met you when I was still struggling with my faith, I would have never left the church.
Yeah.
And so I find myself in, like I said, in this unique position to be able to communicate to people who don't frequently get it. I get to answer their questions. I get to, and they feel comfortable coming to me. And I think, like y'all had talked about, almost everyone I work with, in fact, I would wager probably 95% of them have been deeply hurt by the church. Deeply,
Such
deeply
a common
hurt.
story.
And so,
I wonder too, like, is it a common story period, or is it a common story with nerds? Because like everybody that we have on this podcast, like we're all nerds. They're either making games or they're in the industry in some way, video games, board games, whatever. So is it that commonality that they're nerds, or is it just a common story period? I wonder that.
I think so. I think it is a large group of nerds. Because they are people who are somehow interested in things that have been deemed not okay. Something like Dungeons and Dragons or something that has been vilified by Christianity. And they're saying, man, I'm just into this. I'm having fun doing this. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's been vilified. Or even things like, video games have been vilified to some extent by a lot of society. And, especially parents saying, oh, they see a couple of violent video games, then all of a sudden you're not allowed to play any video games. Right. And so I think it's certainly the case in my experience that a lot of people who are nerds have been hurt by the church because of where their interests lie. And I think nerd culture as a whole is very, very accepting. And so they have found themselves from a place of rejection to a place of acceptance. And so they're able to not only say, I was rejected by the church, but they are now able to say, but I've been accepted by this community. And so they're able to see to a certain extent what a loving community looks like. And so they're able to see what they were missing in a church. So it's not just I was hurt by the church, but it's I didn't receive the nurturing from the people who claimed to be the nurturers of the world.
Right.
So that has definitely been my experience, that a lot of, a bulk of our staff are animators, and, and so they grew up watching a lot of cartoons, and, a lot of cartoons were vilified by the church. And so,
Right.
but that's what they were into. That's what they're interested in. And so just by the very reason of the things that they just happen to enjoy, they've been outcast by the church. And then, on top of that, rejected, oftentimes outright rejected.
So have some people who you have these conversations with come around, like your parents and things? Have they come around to what you do at all?
Some of my extended family understand. My mom is still, she's at a place where she kind of has just accepted it, but still doesn't like it. She's like, well, you just gave up. Yeah, she's like, you can still love on people elsewhere. And I'm like, that's
just not those people.
So I'm just like, I get to, these are people who.
That's the cross you have to bear.
Yeah. These are people who intentionally avoid religious people. And so I don't believe these are people that I could talk with. I might be able to talk with them at a social interaction, but in general, it would be very difficult.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about this podcast is that, I don't think there's a lot of avenues to hang out with and have like a personal conversation with people who are opposed, like not just don't want to go to church, but like are pretty opposed to the idea, and this podcast provides, I think, some people a safe place to have those kind of conversations in a way they're not going to feel threatened. But I hope to some degree they feel like loved and valued, because we really do make an effort to value. We never have anyone on this podcast whose work we don't respect, so you kind of come into the show knowing like, hey, we think what you do is rad and like has value, inherent value, and we think you as a person, as a creative person, have inherent value, and I think when you come with that perspective, like there's an opportunity to open up relationships that we didn't think were possible before.
Right. Yeah, I certainly find myself in that situation where because I grew up in a church that welcomed questioning. Like I said, I think God's big enough to handle any question we have. So they come to me, and they come to me with honest questions because I'm not scared to answer. And they actually want to sit down and they want to listen to and hear what I have to say. So
that's great, man.
Yeah, people who were previously hostile to Christianity, or not, maybe some of them were certainly hostile, and others, perhaps just not interested, are now having conversations with me.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing what love and listening can do? Like, if we just stop with the antics and just be a loving person. Like, it's what I love about conventions is we get to be around a bunch of people that wouldn't be caught dead in a church, and because I'm a Christian, like I'm in church, most of the people that I hang around with are church people. And going to conventions, like I get to be around other people that aren't the same as me, and maybe in some cases are opposed to what I think and feel. And I think that's really healthy to be around people that are different than you. And it gives us the opportunity to like be a different and what we hope better representation of who Jesus is to them. And say like, hey, actually, you're loved and accepted and valued, contrary maybe to what you've heard or felt in the past.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing, like, what that can open up, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I actually find myself, I think more often than not than people just asking me questions, I find myself in a position where people want to talk and I get to listen. I get to hear their story and they don't feel judged by it.
Yeah,
And and most people, I hang out with a whole lot of my work friends, but most of the people, my best friends are all, they're all church friends or people I went to college with. So most of my best friends are in ministry. And so, which is really fun because most of them, actually all of them to my understanding, my closest friends, are very supportive of what I do. Because they're just so excited that I'm able to reach people that they don't. And even potentially couldn't, even at a place like a convention, because when it finally comes out that they're a pastor, people tend to shut down.
I know that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we don't always get into this kind of stuff on the podcast because we have a lot of people in here who are not Christians or come from a different faith background or a lot of agnostic and atheist people on this podcast. But I really appreciate what you're saying because I think sometimes some Christian folks, and maybe some even who are listening to this podcast, think of like being a Christian as like we're people who like proclaim the truth, which is true. Like we proclaim, I think the gospel's true, and we're to proclaim it, but like they don't hear that love part that you were talking about, how like radically devoted to loving people Jesus was, and they see that as sort of like a byproduct of the first thing of the proclamation, but not like integral to the proclamation. Like that is like you can't, if you're not incorporating that into how you're trying to do the proclamation part, like you're missing the boat. Like you don't. You missed the point.
Yeah, you cannot. I mean, by Jesus' own words, you cannot separate, the gospel from love. It's and we're told exactly how to love. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, it is genuinely taking care of and caring for your neighbor.
Yep.
And that's it. And I often point out because people like to just be like, oh, well, the Good Samaritan, it's just a Samaritan. And I point out that the best modern equivalent of Jesus telling the parable of the Good Samaritan would probably be the parable of the Good Muslim. Because Samaritans were considered heretics by the Jews. And so, I imagine if somebody came and started talking about here's how to love, here's an example of a Muslim loving, that would be met with a lot of opposition. This in the exact same way that it was with Jesus. And so I think Jesus did that very intentionally to prove his point to the Pharisees. And so, it is, the gospel is, it is love. It starts with God's love and ends with our love to our neighbors.
That's good. Well, I appreciate it, man. That's appreciate you making me want to get all preachy. So, which I almost never do on this podcast. So, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. We'll have to. Do you still read your Greek New Testament?
Yeah. I'm not as practiced as I used to be, but I usually follow along in the Greek during sermons and stuff like that.
You're
so
one of those.
I took a semester of Greek and got a B.
There you go. Nice.
So I don't remember any of it.
Hey, still.
I took
gyro, but it's not gyro. It's like a gyro. You have to.
So you didn't take biblical Greek.
Well.
Biblical Greek is basically useless.
It was ancient.
Oh,
no, it was ancient Greek. Yeah.
Okay.
I only got a B because there was this girl that liked me, and she made me study with her all the time. And I'm like, well, it's helped me get good grades.
That's lucky. I just Yeah, I loved the Greek. There's just so much there that
Yeah.
is so difficult to translate easily into English because it's a very precise language.
I took 18 hours in seminary, so I
Boom.
share your love for it. Although I don't read my Greek New Testament anymore. So
I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to get back into it. I'd love to get back into actual exposition rather than just.
I'll pray for you guys.
We'll have another podcast where we talk about exposition and
We'll just do the whole podcast in Greek.
parse Greek verbs and stuff.
That's right.
For the masses. People love that kind of content on podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is great, Brett. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, it was really enjoyed
I
it.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Any like projects that you guys are working on that you would want to pitch here? I know you mentioned Rapture Rejects already, but anything you want to push before we go?
I don't think there's any other projects I'm allowed to talk about, so just keep looking.
Are you sure you don't want to talk about one you're not allowed to talk about? It's your last chance.
Yeah.
No, I respect that. Cool, man. Well, so when can people expect to see? I know you said Rapture Rejects is in early access, so people can go ahead and go play it now. Where do they find it?
It's on Steam. They can grab it from Steam. I think it's $30 or $29.99. And we have a lot planned for it. Right now, we're still working on mechanics, making sure everything's working well, but we have a lot of really good stuff planned down the road for it. So
Cool.
I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's a little easier to jump into as a battle royale as opposed to like Fortnite or something like that.
Fortnite stresses me out.
Right? I tried, and I'm just like, man, this is too much.
I don't play video games to like raise my anxiety. I play them to lower it.
Although,
but I think if you jumped into like early access Rapture Rejects, like you're able to kind of be there as the meta is developing. I feel like now if you tried to jump in to Fortnite or PUBG as a new player, like you're just everybody already knows what they're doing. The meta is already there.
Yeah, you have to have like a
how
guide.
would you even?
A friend who's gonna guide you.
But hey, jump into Rapture Rejects, you get to help create that meta, break the game.
That's right. So that's a lot of fun. You can expect to see Freakpocalypse soon. And that'll be really great. Like I said, point and click adventure, and it's set in the Cyanide and Happiness world, so it's a lot like playing one of our animations. It's like you get to be involved with that story, and there's a lot of items you can interact with, and it's good.
Yeah, probably lots of good potty humor.
Absolutely. Literally in the potty. You can go into the boys' bathroom.
Nice.
Great.
That's great, man. Well, cool. Well, thanks again, Brett. Where can people find you online?
You can follow me. I think everything is my handle is Brett A. Vance. It's BRETTAVANCE. And it's me on Instagram, Twitter. So yeah. Come
cool.
Find me, ask me any questions you have.
I just added you on Facebook. I hope it goes through.
We'll see.
Yeah.
that'll be fun
Drew
to find out.
put in a good word for me.
Yeah, I will.
Boom.
He's okay. Chris is all right.
Added.
Yep.
So
wow, look at that customer service responded already.
Yeah,
that's right.
Boom.
Wow.
Well, you can follow Love Thy Nerd on all the social medias. Just search for @LoveThyNerd. We have a really great Facebook community. Just search for Love Thy Nerd Facebook. No, sorry, Love Thy Nerd Community on Facebook. Don't search for Love Thy Nerd Facebook. Search for Love Thy Nerd Community on Facebook. So there's two things: like our page on Facebook, and then ask to join our community. And as long as you're not like a robot, we'll accept you into our community. That's basically the standard. And it's great. Lots of people talking about nerdy things and doing so in a loving way. I think we have one of the kindest, most welcoming communities I've been a part of on Facebook. So go check that out. Consider supporting us. We can't do projects like this without your financial support. We appreciate any way you would support us, your prayers, your insight, your questions. You can send those to me, Drew at lovethynerd.com. But yeah, we also need money to make this thing run. So if you're interested in supporting the work that Love Thy Nerd does, just go to lovethynerd.com/partner. And that's basically it for us. Go check out our website too, lovethynerd.com. And we have a podcast network, lovethynerd.com/podcast. You can check them all out. We have 3 of them. They're all great. Thanks again for listening. This has been Humans of Gaming.